What is it about abandoned buildings that just gives us the creeps? Maybe it's our natural human instinct to be wary of things that just don't look right. We see an abandoned hospital or church and anxiously wonder why these places lay barren. But when we're talking about entire abandoned towns and cities, we know something must have gone seriously wrong. Welcome to Intrigued Mind. Join me today as we count down 10 mysterious ghost towns that will give you chills. There are a great many reasons why a bustling settlement can turn into a ghost town. In the case of Bodie, California, the story is as simple as a bad wager and economic decline. Located in the Bodie Hills east of the Sierra Nevada mountain range, the town began as little more than a prospector's camp following the discovery of gold in 1859. But as interest in gold-bearing ore grew, Bodie was soon transformed from an isolated mining camp into a Wild West boom town. In its prime, Bodie sported a Wells Fargo bank, 4 volunteer fire companies, a brass band, a railroad, a ministers and mechanics union, several daily newspapers, and a jail. Bodie also had over 60 saloons lining its mile-long main street. But as prospectors began to leave Bodie in search of treasures elsewhere, the town began to dry up. First, it transformed to service the families that decided to settle there after the boom. The early 20th century saw a short revival, followed by a further decline. The Second World War saw Bodie's final mine close, never to open again. The town was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1961 and was made a State Historic Park in 1962. Today, Bodie stands tall as an authentic Wild West-era ghost town and sees almost 200,000 visitors a year. So, if you're ever in the area, go give old Bodie a visit. You'll see authentic Wild West architecture, shiver at the sight of abandoned mines, and witness firsthand the perils of that age-old, get-rich-quick mentality. Other ghost towns have a more tragic backstory. Verosha was once the center of the luxurious world, the popular paradise spot of A-listers like Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. But on the 20th of July, 1974, the invasion of the Turkish forces pushed out the town's almost 40,000 inhabitants. The condition of the ghost town stands as a symptom of wider Greek-Turkish relations, dating all the way back to Greece's independence from the Ottoman Empire in 1830. British colonial control of Cyprus from 1878 only exacerbated the problem, shifting the colonial dispute over the island into an ethnic one. On one side, the Greek Cypriots, and on the other, the Turkish Cypriots. Today, the northern third of Cyprus is run by a Turkish Cypriot government, and the southern 2/3 of the island by the internationally recognized Greek government. Diplomatic attempts since 1974 haven't borne much fruit. A UN resolution in 1984 called for the handover of Verosha to UN control and prohibits anyone but the original inhabitants from settling in the town. Still, it lays in ruin. Fenced off from the rest of the world by barbed wire, once lavish homes, apartments, restaurants, and bars are drowned in rotting, overgrown vegetation. Today, tourists, visitors, and ex-residents are strictly prohibited from entering the ghost town. However, it continues to be looted, and occasionally, photojournalists take the opportunity to have a poke around. Probably wouldn't recommend it though, lest you become the center of a heated international incident. But the folly of man isn't the only thing that can turn a lucrative and thriving settlement into a bone-chilling ghost town. Located in the Buenos Aires province of Argentina, the Villa Epiquin was once a thriving tourist destination. Founded in 1920, the site was initially marketed as being the home of a lake with healing properties. The owners even went so far as to hire Italian scientists to bolster the claim. In its heyday, the villa could accommodate over 5,000 visitors. Guests could travel from the nearby city of Caue by train. However, on the 6th of November 1985, a freak weather pattern caused a sesh to break a nearby dam and overcome the dike that protected the village. As the settlement was submerged under a peak of 10-meter deep water, the 280 businesses of the village, including lodges, guest houses, and hotels, were destroyed beyond repair. It remains an abandoned tribute to its lost history. After the flood, many of the ruins were left covered by a thick layer of gray and white salt, leaving the town that drowned with a pale, ghostly hue. The abandoned village is free to visit and sports a single resident to greet you when you arrive. In 2009, Pablo Nowak returned to his home after the waters finally receded enough to do so. With his villa reclaimed, Pablo lives surrounded by silent proof of the water's destructive capability. As deadly as the elements can be, humanity is still able to succeed its penchant for violence and destruction. Oradour-sur-Glane was a village in the Nouvelle-Aquitaine region of France. Although a populated settlement stands with the same name today, the original village was destroyed in a horrific attack on the 10th of June 1944. The Allied Normandy landings in June 1944, a battalion of the 4th SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, stationed in occupied France, was informed that a Waffen-SS officer was being held prisoner by the resistance in the village of Oradour-sur-Glane. In response, the SS regiment assembled the population in the village square for an identity paper examination. According to survivors' accounts, men, women, and children were cruelly and brutally murdered. The men's legs were shot and they were set on fire. The women and children were locked in a burning church and shot as they tried to escape. At the end of the horrific episode, 642 were left dead. 190 men, 247 women, and 205 children. A report from an American witness a few days later stated that he had seen a baby crucified. After the war, a new village was built, but French President Charles de Gaulle ordered that the original be maintained as a permanent memorial to those who were murdered in the massacre. The site remains a historic monument, left to remind us of just a sample of the senseless and unbelievable violence unleashed during the Second World War. The sight of a town or village in abandonment is eerie enough, but when somewhere that was supposed to be full of life lies in ruins, that can really give you chills. Such is the case with the so-called City of Toys in Consuno, Italy. Planned by eccentric Italian businessman and enigmatic entrepreneur Count Mario Bagno, the Consuno resort was envisioned as Italy's answer to Las Vegas. Before construction of the City of Toys began in 1962, Consuno was a small, remote, and peaceful medieval town with a population of only 300 people. But the economic boom of the early 60s was enough to offset any consideration of the town's historical importance. In the process, most of the town's original buildings were destroyed to very little protest. The resort saw a brief period of success in the late 60s, but Consuno was still only partly constructed. As the original inhabitants of Consuno realized what the resort was truly becoming, they began to leave. An agricultural crisis hit, and they began to see that the resort was not a farm holiday center as they were originally promised, but a hedonistic paradise of drinking, gambling, and shopping. Despite the fall in paying customers, the Count attempted to continue construction of the resort. That is, until the main road to Consuno was washed away, and any dream of the resort being finished left with it. Today, that which was completed remains. The lavish buildings are infested with overgrown vegetation, decorated with graffiti, and crumbling under the weight of their own excess. Speaking of terrifying places that once intended to bring people joy, Vidin Park in Hungary has the crown for not only one of the creepiest abandoned places in the world, but also one of the world's only abandoned communist amusement parks. Opening in 1953, Vidin Park was a communist-run theme park, offering free entertainment for all people. Being a non-capitalist venture, the Vidin Park was supported exclusively by government funds. However, the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 meant the closure of the amusement park. It's been falling into a state of decay ever since. The site can be visited today, and adventurers will be chilled to discover the once operational rides drowning in overgrowth and coated in graffiti. Extremely interesting but utterly terrifying. Another tale of rapid rise and lengthy decline is that of Kalmanskop, a small but extremely rich mining village in Namibia. Originally named after a transport driver, Johnny Coleman, who during a sandstorm abandoned his ox wagon opposite the settlement. In 1908, worker Zacharias Luwala found a diamond while working in the area. Soon after, the settlement became known as a diamond hotspot, and the residents began to build the village in the style of a wealthy German town. However, by the time of the Second World War, the town was already in severe decline. To add to the hardship of depleting diamond resources, in 1928, one of the richest diamond-bearing deposits was discovered 300 kilometers south of the town. By 1956, the town was entirely abandoned. Today, it is a tourist destination run by the joint firm Namibia De Beers. But the town also holds two other accomplishments. It was home to both the first tram in Africa and the first X-ray station in the southern hemisphere. Visitors who travel to the abandoned village today find the hospital, ballroom, power station, school, skittle alley, and casino covered in a knee-deep layer of sand. This is due to a mix of geological forces and decay since the mass exodus of Kalmanskop's population. The ghost town is a fully fledged tourist attraction, but due to its situation in a restricted diamond mining area, you would need a permit to enter. It is worth seeing to view the lengths people will go to quench their entrepreneurial thirst. Abandoned properties in general have the tremendous ability to unsettle, but abandoned hospitals, asylums, and prisons hold a special place in human perception. The Ross Island Penal Colony in India is not only an abandoned prison, but it is located on an island with a history of colonial persecution. The British Penal Colony was designed particularly for Indian political prisoners and those associated with reform or revolution. Established in the mid-19th century, the first group of 200 prisoners left from Calcutta in 1858. Chained and collared together, the prisoners were forced to clear the island of its dense forest, lay roads, and build their own shelter. Conditions on the island were reprehensible. At one stage, of the 8,000 prisoners who had been brought to the jail, almost half had died due to sickness. Sir Robert Napier described conditions as beyond comprehension, citing the lack of food, clothing, and shelter provided to the convicts. The jail came to be known as the British Gulag, as the death rate of the prisoners approached 700 per year. Following the disbanding of the penal colony in 1945, nature has reclaimed most of the land and the island operates solely as a tourist attraction. Overgrowth decorates every remain from the island's disgraceful colonial past, leaving behind an eerie and ghostly abandoned settlement. One of the most iconic ghost towns ever left abandoned is Hashima Island, a ghostly reminder of the rapid expansion of industrial Japan and the horrors of the Second World War. Originally established as a coal mining hub due to its vast reserves from the year 1887 to 1974, the island saw a continuous healthy population. As it developed into an industrial hub, the island soon filled with its iconic concrete buildings. The substance was chosen largely to protect against typhoon destruction. In the first half of the 20th century, the residents built apartment blocks, a school, a kindergarten, a hospital, a cinema, shops, a swimming pool, and a town hall. However, the ghostly concrete blocks we see today hold secrets of a darker past. The 1930s saw Korean civilians and Chinese prisoners of war forced to labor in the island's Mitsubishi mine. It is estimated that around 1,300 conscripted laborers died on the island due to underground accidents, exhaustion, and malnutrition. As the demand for coal fell in the 1960s, the mine closed, and by the 20th of April 1974, the island was completely abandoned. The island is a macabre tourist spot. where you can marvel at the largely intact concrete buildings and seawall. Although the Japanese authorities have had trouble clearing the island as a World Heritage Site due to the atrocities which were committed there, it remains one of the world's creepiest abandoned ghost towns. When most people hear the term ghost town, one place more often than not comes to mind. Pripyat, located in northern Ukraine near the Belarus border, was a city built and designed with one very specific purpose in mind: to service the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power station. Originally named after the nearby river Pripyat, the city was founded on the 4th of February 1970, just 16 years before it was evacuated after the worst nuclear disaster in history. Following the disaster, the entire city of Pripyat was evacuated within just 36 hours. An area with a 30-kilometer radius was established around the disaster site by the Soviet armed forces, dubbed the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, intended to restrict access to the extremely hazardous conditions. Today, more than 3 decades after the disaster, the still incredibly dangerous city stands. While explorers and photojournalists have poked around the city with drones and remote cameras, the city has been declared too hazardous for human habitation for at least 24,000 years. Images of the city's abandoned facilities, homes, hotels, restaurants, communal spaces, and gardens lay almost untouched. Residents were told to only take the minimum with them, adding to the eerie atmosphere in the ghost town. Although sustained human habitation of Pripyat nor extensive exploration look like they'll happen anytime soon, the vast array of video and images we have of the city give us a true sense of what a nuclear post-apocalypse might look like. For all these reasons, Pripyat is certainly the world's creepiest ghost town. Like our list? What other ghost towns would you have suggested? For more chilling historical content, make sure to subscribe to the Intrigued Mind channel. See you next time!